Welcome to the At the Coalface podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. This podcast is all about what it's really like in the trenches of digital and e-commerce. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the pod. It's great to be here with you again today. It's my pleasure to welcome Greg Rudakov from Devicedesk out of Melbourne to the podcast today. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, Jason. Lovely to be here.
It's awesome. We were joking just before we kicked off, Aussies tend to have a little bit of a thick accent, and Kiwis as well. And when we jumped on board, I was asking you where you're from because you definitely don't have that strong Aussie twang going on.
Yeah, I'm a little bit traveled. I spent some time in the UK, and I catch up on a lot of different media, and I guess it's my accent's been influenced over the years from a few different sources, so maybe it's blended a bit over the time. But
yeah, look, mine's a
Aussie.
bit of a mess as well, being from the States originally, but being in New Zealand for the last 25 years, my accent's, sounds like I'm at war with myself sometimes, I think.
It's all good. It's all good. We're all used to, hearing all the different voices these days. Everything's online now. So, everything will blend.
Yeah, living on Zoom, right? So,
Yeah.
it is awesome to have you here and to talk about your platform, SaaS platform, Devicedesk.
Yep.
You build yourselves as an enterprise supply platform, supplier products and services available all within one central platform. It's for the enterprise themselves that are perhaps doing the sourcing off of suppliers, but it's also for suppliers to be able to integrate with those enterprises that they're selling to. And then, at least from what I can tell from the website and some of the things I've read about you guys, you're also almost like a distributed order management and inventory management platform all in one. So why don't you kick off and tell me how much of that I got right and how much of that I got wrong?
No, you pretty much nailed it there, and thank you for kind of interpreting it the right way. We live in a world in this sort of B2B space, which is not always easy to understand. It can be a little bit drier, a little bit less sexy. So, but clearly, this is your domain, so you're going to pick up on all the little technical words that we use. But very much so. We're an enterprise supply platform. We kind of see our place in managing the sort of ongoing contracted ordering and supplier arrangements between enterprises or business buyers and their preferred network of suppliers. And we're a pure play B2B SaaS commerce platform. So we're very much built from the perspective of how a supplier is selling into different businesses and all of the associated nuances of B2B commerce that come along with it.
Sounds great. Now, I'm familiar with other platforms that sound a little bit similar to you, like Syndigo and some of the other platforms, New Order, and some of the other platforms out there that claim to do some of the things that you do. Although obviously you guys have your own points of difference in the way that you do it, but based on what I can at least see from your content and how you guys talk about your platform, it feels very much almost like you're replacing a direct and custom EDI integration with a platform. So oftentimes those big suppliers and big customers, they will be directly integrated with each other to be able to, when the customer generates a PO, it automatically flows directly into the supplier via EDI. And then when it's supplied and shipped, then the shipment information, the fulfillment information is shipped back to the customer via EDI. And it feels very much like you guys are almost plugging that gap in a way that is easier to connect. It's more scalable, and it's SaaS instead of having to have this sort of legacy EDI model. Is that clear?
Yeah, it's probably easier to explain it more from the genesis of the product, and then that will kind of give you that linkage as to how we sort of came about. The founding team, we were all enterprise buyers, so we were IT department leaders, CIOs, head of ops, procurement managers, those sort of folk. And we noticed that the real contrast between our lives as business purchasers versus consumer purchasers. And we all know, particularly in the last couple of years, how accessible online shopping has become and how straightforward and simple the process is. But when you sort of take that against what I would say is a generalization, of course, but the general business purchasing experience is a little bit behind that. You still have a very interpersonal element. Often the products are a bit more complex. There's sort of solutions around them. They're not necessarily just an iPhone in black. It might be a more complex, configuration or customization around a product. We found that, there is heavy manual process in the general buying experience, whether it's from the quotation side and having to talk to an account person to, raise you an electronic proposal or even a physical proposal at some point, all the way through to each step of that buying journey, seems to be like there are teams of operational people sitting in different parts of businesses kind of fulfilling and copying and pasting between systems. And we found that, what seemed like sort of an innocent or simple process sometimes, like, stocking the IT cupboard full of spare mice or charges, actually can be quite laborious in turning around just a quote on and a purchase of something sort of so innocent. And so we kind of identified that the B2B shopping experience could certainly be improved. And that complexity isn't actually an inhibitor. Yes, it's certainly complex. There's no doubt. We have found, the B2B buying obviously has many different rules and pricing overlays and, individual terms and things like that to consider. But the reality is that you can still certainly purchase via an online store model. It doesn't have to be something that feels like a mail order catalog from the 80s. And quite often, in a lot of industries, particularly in the non-technology industries, it is very much still of that era, is what we're finding.
Look, I totally agree with you, and I'm experiencing, I guess, very similar things in my business because I focus on B2B businesses and helping them implement e-commerce, oftentimes for the very first time, particularly because of COVID. And those businesses oftentimes have historically relied on field sales reps, BDRs, BDMs, and account managers and the like to complete their transactions. But now their end customers, their business customers, are saying, hey, we want to be able to buy online with you in exactly the same way that we do our B2C purchases in our daily, home life. But we want to have a similar type of experience online with you. And we want to get all of our preferential pricing and price lists. And we want to get, we want the ability to request custom quotes and the like. So I guess you would consider yourself, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you would put yourself more in the same vein because you provide the front end as well. So you provide the e-commerce front end. And so you would consider yourself more of a BigCommerce B2B edition or a Peppery or a New Order than you would a Syndigo, for example.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so the components that we've invested in, we've built the IP in, are certainly around that presentation, and that's very commoditized. I mean, there's nothing particularly special about arranging products in a nice visual manner that's easy to use. The major kind of investments we've made are probably there are two parts. There is the catalog engine of how you present and how you structure complex products. So high optionality, combining request forms and other, business information alongside the concept of a product itself. And then also things like the business rules that are required around the ordering process. So sometimes it's quotations first. Sometimes there actually needs to be maybe a technical sign off on a solution. So it needs to be eyeballed by an approver before a quote can go out, or it needs to be approved at a financial spend level before it can be authoritatively purchased. There's a lot of those sorts of things that we've particularly invested in, alongside an array of business system connectors. So obviously integration is a huge benefit of B2B process automation, and we've started our journey, I guess, in the technology supply. So we work very much in the channel reseller market. We work with the telcos. Those sort of businesses today, we found the common platforms that they use. It might be things like ServiceNow or Zendesk for tickets. It might be ConnectWise in the MSP space, Xero for finance. All those various best of breed SaaS platforms. Our view is that we don't want to lift and shift anyone's platform and become, the system that has to replace. We don't want to have that discussion, to be honest. We are very much in the position of, you have a business process, you have systems you've already invested in. Our job is to make them talk. Our job is to make that process flow and get rid of the copy and paste and get rid of the email translation from sort of free form, multiple back and forth clarifications of requests into something that is high quality, validated, business ready at the input stage. That's what's been the greatest, I guess, asset and things that our customers are enjoying. High quality input routed directly to the right people for fulfillment without the need for follow up, for QA, for sign offs and things like that with internal teams. It's input once, it's input well, and it's ready to go. We try and push as much as possible that people have already made investments in their various business systems, and this isn't to replace them. It's about making them work better.
That makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of pain out there in the B2B space. There's no question about that, particularly from a B2B ecom space. And so when you talk about some of those back office connectors that you have already built out or are in the process of building out, I'm guessing that includes things like ERPs like NetSuite and D365 and some of those other quasi ERPs like your Sin7s of the world and your inventory management systems like Unleashed, etc. I'm guessing that you have that sort of suite of connectors that, although it's easy to say plug and play, but there's always a mapping and a configuration that's required even with out-of-the-box connectors. But would you say that it's easier for brands to get up and running on your platform from an e-commerce perspective than it would be for most other B2B focused e-com platforms out there that require usually bespoke integration between their back office operational and functional systems and their front end presentation layer for the customer?
Yeah, I mean that is definitely how we're positioning it. We have already pre-built connectors, no doubt, and we're always scouring the market as we talk to new customers and things like that to try and work out what that forward pipeline of connector is, so that we are ready to go and that we can truly mock up a demo, including integration as part of the sales process. It's quite exciting to sort of have a sales process where you can actually demonstrate a working system, even to the point of, say, connecting into your prospective customer's sandbox environment and say to them at the end, do you want this or should I just delete it? That's, I think, a very powerful message, and it's an exciting way to sell, rather than having to kind of sit there in the sales side going, I'm going to promise the world, but I hope I can deliver on this. It's much easier when you have this stuff built already. There are we live in a world now where there are so many SaaS platforms with wonderfully public and rich API sets. We've got our standard patterns. We know how business and enterprise buyers like to buy. It is 80% common. It's the classic 80-20 rule. So we've got the sort of base configs and the base configurators already ready to go. And then, yes, everyone has one little business process they've made custom, but it's much easier to sort of fiddle around the 20% than have to build the 80% every time. So the philosophy is very much, there's a standard pattern. It's worked for, everyone to date. So we're going to continue to do that. And we just add more connectors as we go.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, those design patterns become really critical, not just obviously for your business, but also for the rest of the stack as well. And I work with design patterns kind of every day. You kind of figure out what works, and then sure, on a business to business basis, there's a need to tweak and I guess adapt that for a specific scenario. But in general, those things are replicatable and they're scalable as a result. Now, you guys talk about having a catalog engine, integrated workflows, multi-customer ready. Now let's just dissect each of those just one at a time,
Sure.
if we could.
Yeah.
And let's look at your catalog engine. So you don't pitch yourself, at least as far as I can tell, you don't pitch yourself as a full-blown PIM system. You're not a Riversand, you're not an InRiver, you're not a PIM core, but you're maybe one layer below that. You're probably more than your typical Shopify catalog system.
Yeah.
So you've got more capabilities there around perhaps the types of product models that you support. So the parent-child relationship, the number of variants, the layers of varianting, the layers of product attributes, et cetera. It sounds like you can handle more complexity from a product model perspective than, say, your typical B2C focused ecom platform, but you stop short of a full-blown PIM.
Everything is kind of customer driven and driven based on our observations of the market and things like that. I think you've nailed the positioning that we take there. Your out of the box B2C is t-shirt sizing. That's the level of typical optionality within a product. So you might have a color, you might have a size, you might have an input box for a simple piece of information. That's not enough, particularly in the space where we've grown from, which is, more technology supply. So for example, we deal in, one of our customers over here deals very much in meeting room technology. And that includes, everything from a basic, screen with a camera attached to it up to sort of auditorium style number of microphones and all this sort of stuff. And you can imagine that the variance in some of these product configs can be huge. They can be a $5,000 product or a $50,000 product very quickly, just depending on the options that are selected. And there's option dependency and all those sorts of things. And that's what we've had to build the system to handle. So we can do, we have mobile fleet dealers who are pumping out iPhones and Samsungs and things like that. And their SKUs are really simple. They're just, what color is it? And do you want a case or not? All the way through to, very complex network setups, firewall setups, all of that sort of thing that requires a lot of configurability, a lot of validation. We've built quite significant validation and lookups into external systems, picking up, say, an address of a particular item at the product stage, not in a shipping scenario, but just to understand maybe the size and shape that fits because other metadata is applicable. So yeah, very much beyond your sort of basic B2C, but not PIM in the sense of, because a lot of the stuff is custom. It's not, you don't just get a PIM supplier for some of these configurations. And we do find that a lot of the businesses we work with are supplying services alongside those products. So part of a product configuration may be certain PDFs or brochures get attached, based on selecting an option. And then that forms part of a digital workflow or proposal bundle, which is all part of kind of the sales automation side of us, before then the acceptance stage, and then that moves into an authoritative order, which then processes into a different system. That's the way we think about it, and we're trying to, now that we've kind of found our niche or comfort in the tech side, we're looking at the broader B2B market and saying, okay, well, a widget is a widget. It doesn't matter if it's a bag of coffee beans or an engine part. They still fit the same model, and so we're looking at that next layer of B2B, and what is that, the next level of verticals that we could be chasing as well.
Yeah, and every vertical has its own unique product model requirements, right? Yeah. And so I assume that within your product model flexibility, you support things like bundles, like kits, those really complex product models that go beyond the simple parent-child variant relationship, where, to give an example from the B2C world, if you're on a furniture website, you might want to buy an entire, bedroom's worth of furniture. And so you got to pick your mattress, your bed base, your side tables, your tall boy, etc. Yeah. And depending on the combination that you buy, or even which components that you buy, you might take the bed and the bed base and the tall boy, but you might not take the side tables. And so therefore the price has to dynamically adjust, and the discount factor has to adjust for the components you do choose. And you may want to discount the entire bundle if it goes over a certain price, or there's multiple different layers of complexity around that sort of bundling and kitting scenario, particularly in the B2B space. And I'm guessing that you guys cater for that level of complexity with the different verticals that you deal with.
Totally. And I mean, we have scenarios where, you have that sort of optionality, like you just said, and let's think, back to a technology outcome, but we have things like an X amount of sort of installation hours calculation ability, so depending on the complexity of product, someone may need to sort of facilitate 2, 4, 8 hours of installation or config time into that quote as well. And so, we have to go as far as that to sort of really, to generate something that is complete and doesn't have to then have a salesperson, kind of sit there at the end of the process and edit or add something. We've built a system that's very rich with business rules. So, people can self-serve as much as they could be guided via the sales team. And, one of the things we found is that early on, we sort of made the mistake of saying, we can replace the account or sales team, because everyone will self-serve. And we know that's a trend. And we know that whether we want to chalk that up to millennial buyers or just comfort with online shopping, that's the way to go. But what we did find was actually we can be the sales team's best friend because we can automate that whole CPQ side. At the same time, it's still a cart process. It's just a salesperson logging on rather than the customer. And then they get an extra checkout step to review and finalize, the quote that goes out, as opposed to someone just placing an order. Yeah, we found that the richness of the product config and the way that things are built up is really important in that B2B space, because there are a lot of things that that have to be factored in that, us as consumers don't need to worry about typically, because we buy simpler things.
One of the most complex parts that I'm seeing out in the B2B e-commerce space is shipping, right? Shipping costs and shipping integration and what that looks like. And oftentimes the form that takes, from what I'm seeing, is an order will come in, it'll be placed on a B2B e-commerce website, but it's almost like a draft order still at that state until it gets into the ERP or the WMS, OMS, or whatever it is that's actually doing the customer specific freight calculations, because oftentimes they'll be getting different freight rates based on the customer tier or group that they happen to sit in. And as a result of that can make the shipping or freight matrix rates much more complex than you would ever get in the B2C world. And so oftentimes what we're seeing the freight calculations being done in the ERP, and then the order being appended via reverse integration back into the e-com platform, and the order effectively finalized with all the final freight rates and final quantities and everything else that for example, are able to be fulfilled off of that order. Is that something that you guys are seeing and have catered for in your platform, whether it be via the API layer or being able to set up those hyper complex freight rules on a per customer basis within your platform?
Yeah, no doubt you're seeing exactly what we're seeing. It's the same challenge. Freight shipping always becomes a challenging aspect. I think our experience is obviously in a particularly, in one vertical. I think no one has, in my experience, solved that very well in a business rules sense. We get, just because of the vast difference in, what a catalog could represent in our space. Like I said, the things that literally may even need a forklift or could be put in a simple post satchel in the same catalog, makes that extremely difficult. And yes, our experience is that most of them reserve the right to sort of make that amendment at ERP level. It's kind of like all the T's and C's, all the proposals are kind of geared towards a little asterisk at the end on the shipping stage to say, look, we might need to throw a cost here, and we'll sort that out independently. It is a very complex area, and I have not seen that in my experience, really well automated. It's because there is also some commercial kind of leverage or considerations as well, that are even sort of set up in the terms of supply, because we don't tend to work in a just direct self sign up B2B ordering scenario. We're more in contracted supply that tends to generate our portal. So we sort of come along the journey of someone's gone to market for a fleet of equipment or a particularly large solution, and part of that market response is to provide online ordering. That's one of the common entries that our portals come up. Yeah, they often have almost the shipping rates just assumed that they're baked into prices and things like that as part of that, and someone's done the modeling and said, what, we'll just put a few points on and pray that we'll still make money at the end, because it's really hard.
Totally agree. Now, you also say that you manage sort of the integrated workflow side of things. So whether that be, a request for quote or responding to quotes or even generating, not so much a quote, but a pitch for a product through the platform for a specific customer. So effectively, they haven't initiated a quote request from their side, but you're effectively putting a custom price together for them. Also managing tickets, invoicing, etc. You effectively provide also an invoice portal. And I'm guessing that the end customer, the B2B customer, can log into their invoice portal, pay by statement or invoice or whatever, however they want to pay. And then I'm guessing you service, in most cases with B2B, we find that obviously they're buying on account, and so they've got credit terms, and then they are paying against effectively a credit account on an invoice or statement basis. So I'm guessing you can manage all those different permutations, whether it's on account, whether it's by business credit card, all those different payment methods, payment terms, credit stop, all that sort of stuff. I'm guessing that you can manage within your platform, whether that be an integrated credit stop value that comes from ERP and ultimately is managed by you guys on the front end, or those different scenarios of being able to handle those really unique workflows on a B2B customer specific basis?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I would say that nearly 100% of our checkouts are via some sort of purchase order credit based workflow. It is really, really rare that we take a credit card oriented, transaction. And again, that's because I guess the space that we tend to work in is that contracted supply, where it's not someone who's self-registering for the first time and placing a business order in the system, although, there's absolute potential to do that. Yeah, the credit limiting or the credit management is a key feature of a number of our clients. Some of the telcos will, as part of a carriage deal, they might set up $1 million fund to draw down your devices from, and that needs to be managed, for example. So as each business logs in and they've got X million dollars or some credit limit that they can buy their phones in, it deducts from that, and then the system will protect from oversubscription of that, and prompt and warn and do all the good things that are supposed to be happening, so no one accidentally gets into a scenario where they've overcommitted. So yeah, credit management's a big part of a lot of the portals that we deal with, particularly in the telecom space, for sure.
Yeah, that combination of sort of service plus our hardware is a really complex model. I've worked with a few different telcos before in terms of helping to architect solutions for them in terms of the way they sell into the market, and man, it gets hyper complex, hyper fast, especially with the product churn cycles that they go through, the release cycles, and the release cycle seems to be getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and so they want to put an old model on a discount, but they want to sell the new model at full price, or they want to discount it if you buy a term that's a certain length, and just the permutation, the matrices that you can build out of these product models, and the discount model and the sell-through model starts to become really complex, really fast. And I guess that leads into my next question, which is you can handle these sort of complex customer models as well, right? Which is sort of, and you alluded to this already, but maybe we can explore this just a little bit further, which is, many organizations, the B2B customer side, when they're buying as a B2B customer, they will have a buying hierarchy. They'll have a senior buyer, a junior buyer, a final authorization, a super admin, whatever you want to call them. They'll have these different tiers within their organization. They'll have category buyers sometimes, or things like that, where ultimately you've got this hierarchy, this relationship between a parent and child account. They've all got their own individual logins, but there is a relationship between those logins. And so therefore, someone might be able to add to their cart, but if they're a category buyer or a junior buyer, it may have to go to a senior buyer for approval before the order is officially placed. So it's almost like a draft order until that authorization comes through. And then you have to have the notification workflows and all that stuff to go to the senior buyer so that they know that they need to authorize an order, right? So I'm guessing that you deal with these hyper complex parent-child relationship customer models as well.
Yeah, that was what I was referring to with our approval structures. So, you have kind of the quotation level approvals, and that's more of a system kind of, stage perspective, where a card is put together, it's put through the electronic signing, and then through that signing engine that can obviously be delegated up and around as required. But then there are also actual product approvals or card approvals just on the card itself, and that we use through a email based smart hyperlinking sort of approach, where you can say, well, Jason's asked for this $10,000 order, but Greg has to approve it. And, Greg can do that just from his phone, from his inbox, as opposed to, having to log into the system, trawl through whatever else. So we've built this sort of, offline handling of that, which also means that, we don't even have to have them as, customer accounts on the system. They can just be effectively approval only users. And, they're just going about their day as a business leader or someone who has, a level of authority that's required, without having to be anywhere near the system. They get what they need need. They get a list of items or whatever that is. They can put comments, they can approve, they can decline, and then obviously that flow is all sort of managed within the system. And the original requester see that it was approved, or they can see why it wasn't re-requested if they need to make adjustments. So yeah, absolutely, that's a very common thing. And we actually, that grew out of us actually putting a catalog together around firewall management, and so not B2B product at all, but actually service requests. We had a scenario where someone was managing security rules, and they needed a security approver to make sure that the rule wasn't going to cause unnecessary openness of systems on the internet and things like that. So even if someone wanted it maybe for a project or something like that, there was a security officer sign off. And so like I was saying, we do have these very hybrid scenarios where on one hand someone might be selling network equipment and specifying wireless access points or things like that, but alongside it there is just as much kind of service oriented detail that goes with it to say, well, are you using it the right way? Is it built for the right for the right site? That complexity again always creeps in somehow.
It always does. And I guess that really comes down to almost being able to build out a configurator on the front end that someone, almost like that quiz commerce scenario, you ask 5 questions and then effectively present, a series of say 3 or 4 appropriate products for that scenario. So totally makes sense. And how do you guys deal with product sampling? Now, I know that in the B2C space, with B2C focused e-commerce platforms, sampling becomes a real nightmare because you effectively have to do some fudge work on the front end because you can't have a $0 item in the catalog. It just doesn't allow it. It doesn't allow you to place an order for a $0 item. And so you typically have to hack it. You got to put a price on there, and then you've effectively got to have a discount, a transparent discount at checkout when you've got a custom attribute so that it effectively discounts it down to 0 in the cart. And there's a lot of hacks, I guess, around the product sampling space. And many B2B businesses need to be able to provide product samples, and they need for their customers to be able to order them within certain rules and constraints on their account. And do you guys handle that as well?
Yeah, look, zero value transactions are part of the system from the very beginning because we have this concept of service requests alongside product orders and different balances of those. So in that scenario, it's just simple as we can create a something that looks like a request to fulfill that. And so in that scenario, we just build a sample request page, and they could drop down from particular products if they want to do that. But there's actually no complexity for us for Xero because we kind of built that from the very beginning, because we do have this sort of hybrid catalog object or different catalog objects that flow through the system, and some carry very much a $0 because they form the concept of doing something or supporting something. So yeah, it's actually not really a problem. It's quite easy to facilitate for us.
That's great. I mean, I guess that is born out of the fact that you were, a B2B enterprise focused platform from day one. So instead of kind of having to bolt that on after the fact or bolt some of this functionality on after the fact, although you can do that being a SaaS platform, you can, add new functionality and features and roll that out to every customer that's using your platform. So I'm not suggesting you can't do that, but I guess your whole ethos and your whole the whole foundational beginnings of your business and of the platform were really focused at some of those enterprise use cases that you just don't see in your typical B2C environment.
Yeah, exactly. It's always been a pure play B2B, and as hard as it is with a relatively new company looking to grow, to sort of steer away from opportunities in that B2C space. But, one of my philosophies very strongly here is that, you got to stick to your patch, and you need to do that patch well, and trying to be everything to everyone is just a compromise. So yeah, we're very much pure play B2B. We know what works in that space, and that's what it kind of gives us that strong storytelling for prospective customers in our space.
And you guys have obviously been up and running for 6 years now, so you're well beyond the stage of a startup. That's for sure. I wouldn't consider you a startup anymore, but maybe a scrappy bootstrapped business, but certainly not a startup at 6 years old usually.
I like scale up at this point.
Scale up. Yeah, you're at the scale up stage, right? But your brother's recently joined you in the company as well, right? I recently connected with him on LinkedIn as well, and we're both into motorbikes, and so we had a brief chat about motorbikes, which was really fun. And he said you're the guy that's really into cars, but what's it like working with your brother in the business?
It's really good. I mean, so my brother Steve, he actually was one of our foundation investors, and tipped a little bit of cash into the story from the very beginning. But it was very much a silent partner for most of the journey. It just happened that at the time when he originally invested, he was very much in an engineering capacity professionally, actually automotive engineering, strangely enough that we're talking about motorcycles and cars and all of that. But he pivoted into software himself in his career. And everything just aligned kind of, this year where we had a big uptick in growth and really built out our team, several times here in the headquarters in Melbourne. It was just the right timing. Steve had some great sort of product B2B, platform knowledge he could just walk in with, and a great network to boot. Plus, it was the right time for us to, bring in some more talent. And Steve and I have a great relationship, online, offline, inside the business, outside the business. So it's good to have someone close, but because he's been part of that journey from the very beginning as a sort of shareholder, he's obviously been watching it very closely. So he's hardly having to sort of onboard and learn things from scratch. He's been very close to it from very early on. So it's an exciting time. We've grown the team phenomenally this year, really built out all the different functional areas around product engineering, customer success. Our final pieces at the moment are in that growth side. So we're really building out sort of sales and marketing, taking on, like I said, looking at these new verticals, looking at these opportunities to, really multiply the business.
That's where you want to be. And you spoke of growth and sort of almost getting into that hyper growth phase of the business, which is great to hear. Good on you. Congratulations. And maybe you can speak to over the last 18 months. I mean, I know that 2020 was insane for me. 2021 is even more insane. It's, COVID continues to bite, and the way that our governments in particular are responding continues to bite. And so, lots of physical retail stores being closed and more businesses moving online, to sort of help themselves be sustainable. And have you seen COVID impacts on your businesses? Do you think that's been a big driver of growth for you? Because I've certainly seen that, particularly in the B2B space, where they just realize, gosh, we just have no choice. We've got to be online, and we've got to have a really effective e-commerce experience.
I think my overall perception is it's netted pretty well for us in terms of, we were certainly shielded from any labor issues. We've always operated online and cloud-based and things like that, so we didn't have any real significant impact from the lack of being able to go into an office. As you're probably aware, Melbourne is one of the most locked down cities of the world. We're still not allowed to to sit in our offices at the moment, but hopefully by the end of the year that will change. But the fortunate thing is that because of just the nature of the business we work in, sort of remote working and all of that wasn't such a big concern. I found from a customer that the very early stage of the pandemic, there was certainly some decision hesitancy. Everyone was a bit unsure because, global pandemics don't come along that often. But we are really fortunate to be in the industry we're in. Tech has not really suffered. In fact, tech is obviously some really big beneficiaries in the online shopping space in particular. Our customers tend to be large, enterprises. Typically, they've certainly got the capacity to weather the storm of fluctuations in, their customer behavior. So we certainly didn't see anyone drop off, and we're very, sticky system by nature. Our view is that if we keep innovating, we keep doing the right thing, we're kind of eternal, particularly with the integration story and allowing, our customers to pick and choose the platforms they use, and we just act as the glue. So even if someone wants to come along and change their ERP or change their work management or inventory system, it's a matter of just exchanging the connector, and in some ways we shield their customers from any change at all by providing that same front end. So I think we've been really fortunate in where we've been positioned. It's been quite good, and 2021 in particular has been a very strong year for us in a number of ways in terms of everyone's now adjusted to this sort of, way of working, certainly locally. We do happen to have customers that are very much in a space which is considered essential. They are providing network services. They're providing literally work from home packs like headsets and cameras. So certainly our customers are more and more dependent on our systems for lots of reasons, not just because we're, enabling them online, but because the products that they carry are very much in demand. So I think we're fortunate. It's been good timing for us. And also when we had any of the decision latency appear, or customers just a little bit umming and ahhing about would they want to sort of open up that next stage of their workflow or integrate deeper or whatever that might be as an ongoing conversation, it actually gave us time to get through some of the classic backlog items that you have in SaaS platforms and go, you know what, this is a great time to tackle that latent issue that we've been meaning to, but we just keep getting too busy to fix. And so we had a huge uptick in our kind of QA process, and we managed to build out automated testing, and pipelines got faster, and we consolidated a whole range of code. And so even in the downtime, we sort of really focused on making hay, and that's just going to set us up, I think, for us. The reality is in Australia, probably 2022 is the new dawn at this point, and Australia is still our primary market, so we'll see what that brings. But I'm very confident that we have a tremendous team sitting here ready to just attack that growth phase that we've got coming up.
Excellent planning, and taking advantage of making hay while the sun shines is always a great idea. So I love that. Now, how did you come up with the name Devicedesk? Because it doesn't allude to anything to do with ecom. And what are some of the, if we were to look at the next 6 to 12 months of product development roadmap and functional enhancements that you'd love to see the platform have within the next 12 months? And I know you can't obviously share everything, but what are some of the key areas that you see? Hey, we admit we've got some gaps in our platform, and we'd love to plug these 3 gaps within the next 12 to 18 months in our platform.
Yeah. So to start with the name, look, it's a whole conversation on its own. As you can appreciate, anyone starting a business, they want to get the right name. They want to check domain availability. There's so many different discussions. It can eat up days and months of founders' time to work out what the business is called and why. And often it's done, in a period of high risk of pivot. So to not give the long form answer, but basically we originally saw ourselves as an internal shopping cart for IT departments, because that was where we had all come from. And we'd actually built that capability several times over the years, because the founding team had worked together in different businesses. We'd go in, and we were often more transformative IT groups. We'd come along to an environment that was probably, maybe wasn't as contemporary, and bring a whole wave of new thinking. And CX has always been at the core. It's almost a key philosophy that CX matters so much to us as a driving factor. So the original Devicedesk was actually an internal IT function, and it wasn't actually a B2B supply platform. It wasn't anything that it is today, other than the fact that it shared a sort of e-commerce-y catalog front end. It was actually a kind of almost halfway through our journey that pivot came, when we found that the IT department market wasn't as progressive as maybe we had been as individuals. And we were talking about, and it seems crazy to think, but people weren't even talking about digital as a concept. And now we're almost post-digital, I feel. And so we were trying to break into a market, but there was just too much education. And that's never a good sales strategy when you've got to educate first. We've got to find that headache pill, that those various analogies of need to address. So Devicedesk came from the idea that, we were dealing very much with devices and desks and, people's working lives, and supporting engaged workforce with technology. And what's in a name? I mean, it's just the name that has stuck. And it does actually fit really well with our current market in terms of, because we're in that technology supply space. So everyone kind of goes, oh yeah, totally. And it sounds like a service desk. And, we actually found that our customers were, even though we set out to be almost hidden, in a B2B like white label scenario, we were allowing our customers to present their portals under whatever name they wanted. They don't have to log on to Devicedesk as such. But they actually were happy. They were happy with the name, and they were using it not in a white label sense. They were using, when they would send it out and give instructions of, how to order with us, they would say, log on to our Devicedesk site. And then moving into kind of our next, our roadmap and our future, we're really pushing that shift. So where we previously would simply engage a supplier and build their portal for them, and it would be a standalone, prospect, we actually started finding that we had common customers accessing multiple Devicedesk portals. When you think about a corporate or an enterprise business, they're buying their laptops from someone, they're buying their network gear from someone else, they're buying their uniforms from someone else. No one is supplying the entire market. And so when we did a quick, kind of pivot analysis of all the, account names and things like that, and we found that there were the same names popping up in some of the different sites, but they're all actually separate identities. And that's actually just not a great experience. You've got a different username and password, but you're actually still logging on to the same underlying platform. So on one hand, we kind of had a single sign-on agenda to solve a better experience. But then that transformed into going, well, you know what? Because all of the suppliers that subscribe to us and use a Devicedesk portal for their orders actually follow the Devicedesk ordering pattern to a large extent, and they're all familiar between the two. Why don't we just aggregate this into an enterprise supply portal in aggregate? And so we're pushing more and more to saying, okay, customer X, you actually have already 3 Devicedesk ordering portals. We should be looking at saying, well, what are the other suppliers that you order from? And why don't we shift this to, rather than having a supplier driven enterprise profile where they're defining, their set of cost centers or their PO or checkout, requirements and things like that, and actually come back and say, well, why don't you log on to Devicedesk, the platform, and set your profile once, set your password complexity, integrate your login IDs with your single sign-on with your business, have this concept of a company profile more generally, and then each of our supplier portals individually honor that profile, and then in vice versa, any integrations back to that, almost that EDI story and things like that you're talking about, start to flow through more naturally. But certainly from a visibility of who can do what and policy and control, it just starts to make a lot of sense. So we're certainly shifting to more aggregate, and it's not so much us, seeing that as our vision. It's actually really a necessity, because we've got companies in this scenario right now where they're logging onto different Devicedesk areas, but that with a different ID, even though it's the same email. So we're actually just solving a CX problem with our strategic vision at the same time. So that's pretty exciting. The more and more friction out of the ordering process, back to our sort of CX philosophy, the more friction we remove, the simpler everything comes, the more enabled people feel. They just get through these processes quicker. Sales teams are not sweating the small stuff. They're not dealing with templates and proposals and dragging them into DocuSign and setting up signer frameworks. They're just hitting a cart and saying, yep, raise that quote. And they can work on the big strategic stuff. They can do the multi-million-dollar projects where they're going to get a good commission, and they're not working on the supply cupboard scenario. And likewise, if a customer is in a self-serve mode, obviously we're enabling them from the get-go. That's what we want to keep doing, and keep having them as enabled as possible. So they are getting as much, rich information about the business that they are in, their policies, their procurement policies, their credit terms are flowing through to every supplier, and the suppliers are just saying, yep, we got it. Devicedesk is this one-stop shop. We've got the profile. Let's go and use it. As I said, in the specifically enterprise supply, where they have contracted suppliers, typically multi-year deals, it all just kind of works well when you can go to one place and sort of just pick and choose from the suppliers that you've already got relationships with.
Feels very much like the trade square model, right? So you're just effectively establishing a marketplace of all the B2B sellers within your ecosystem, and putting them through effectively a single, portalized experience with a single sign-on for all the users, the end buyers, the end customers, and even for the businesses that trade business to business amongst each other. multiple suppliers selling both directions, bidirectionally to each other.
Yeah.
You're effectively creating a B2B marketplace off the back of your own network of sellers, which makes a hell of a lot of sense. And it is that marketplace model where you have, each user only has one login to effectively the marketplace, right? And they only have to maintain that in one place. And so whether they're a user of their own portal or their own marketplace effectively, or whether they're logging on to that network of marketplaces or that network of sellers to make a purchase, it's SSO across the whole group. And so that makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously Shopify's done a good job with their single sign-on platform across all Shopify stores, if it's a recognized email address. So the patterns are there, right, in the marketplace. And, Australia is one of the most marketplace-heavy countries in the world. I'm not aware of one that's more marketplace-heavy than Australia. So you'll fit right in Australia if you go down that marketplace path, which it sounds like you are. So well done. Good product roadmap development, good, problem-solving element to your product development roadmap and your NPD sort of life cycle. And are all of your, just as we come to the end of our time together, thank you so much for your time. Is the entire team based in Melbourne, or do you have sort of a distributed team around the world with COVID?
We have it distributed at the moment, as a lot of early stage companies start. We originally built out of an offshore model for lots of reasons, as you could appreciate, and then as we've grown, we've now headed our sort of engineering and product and all that sort of stuff here in our main office. So we've got about 50-50 now, local and offshore. And very happy with the offshore team. Personally, I've spent a lot of my career kind of learning the ways of managing offshore teams and time zones and all that sort of thing. And so I think we've managed to sort of build the right kind of culture that gets the benefits of it without too many of the pitfalls, because there are challenges obviously of time zone and culture and all those sorts of things that can make the working life a little bit challenging. But yeah, we're certainly pushing towards growing the local capability. There is nothing like having everyone in the office or having a collaborative discussion, and that's probably the biggest thing you miss in the lockdowns that we have to go through, is that you can't all get in front of a whiteboard and draw up a strategy. Online tools only get you so far. So I'm super keen to have everyone back in the room. So yeah, local forwards for sure.
Fantastic, mate. Well, look, thank you again so much for your time, Greg. I really appreciate it. You've given us some deep insights, not only into your business, but some of the changing evolution of the market that you're seeing in B2B. It is an exciting space. The statistics or the forecast and the modeling that I'm seeing around B2B commerce full stop versus B2C over the next decade certainly bodes well for both of us in terms of servicing the B2B commerce space. I think, it's going to outgrow the B2C space, on a, I think they say on a scale of 3 or 4 to 1 over the next decade. So certainly the growth in B2B e-commerce in particular is going to be absolutely explosive. In the B2C space, it's a lot more mature. It's almost an expectation for a traditional retailer to have an e-commerce channel at least, and also an omni-channel experience if they have physical retail estate. So, I think that the opportunity in B2B is just incredible. And it's awesome to see you guys going hammer and tongs at that really, really niche focus of B2B e-commerce. So congratulations, and I wish you all the best. And let's stay in touch, and let's see how I'm looking forward to seeing how Devicedesk evolves over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the At the Coalface podcast. If you want more At the Coalface, you can subscribe to our premium e-commerce and digital newsletter, At the Coalface Digest.